Scopogaban and Nico Robin. Name a more dynamic duo. I'll not wait, because we have far too much to get into this week, including the now confirmed hidden history between Brook and Gonko, and also something that a lot of people may have overlooked in regards to Yarl, and why he was the one given the dilemma to decide Elbaf's future. But this chapter begins pretty hilariously by showing us a very classic group of Straw Hats captured together image, and I have to say that seeing Jinbei tied up with Usopp, Brook, and Nami is a bit surreal. It reminds me a lot of when Zoro got caught with Brook and Usopp in that teeny tiny cage on Fishman Island, which was a very similar situation actually, because Hody Jones caught them and then he made an announcement to the entire island, just like St. Summers is doing right now. Hody was even giving the island an ultimatum as well, which was to betray the humans or die. But Nami even mentions how odd it is that this happened with Jinbei here, although I'm honestly not sure if any of the monster trio would have helped out more in this position. Sanji would have been simping for Gonko and become powerless. Luffy always gets caught by a gimmick enemy during their first encounter, and so really the only hope would have been Zoro and his horrible sense of direction being somehow immune to Gonko's abilities. So I guess this is a bit of a rite of passage for Jinbei. Now that he's officially a Straw Hat, he's just gonna have to get used to getting captured every now and then for fun story reasons. Now, one very extremely exciting thing that happens in chapter 1147 is that we now have confirmation that Gonko knows exactly who Brook is, and under threat of foot in face, demands that he devote himself entirely to her. To which Brook refuses, proving that he is far stronger than the majority of the internet would have been in this exact same position. But this is another classic Brook moment, because he goes on to hype up his captain and states that he would rather embrace death than live without honor. But then something very weird happens with Gonko. She kicks Brook as punishment for him not wanting to become her music slave. And then we cut to this panel of Gonko grabbing her chest, which I think is meant to be Gonko grabbing her heart, because this is neither the time nor the place for grabbing other chest-related items. And the onomatopoeia being used here is Giyu, which is the sound of something being squeezed, hugged, or even crushed tightly. So whatever's happening here is some pretty serious pain, and it's just such a weird panel. And I guess my current reading of it is that it gave Gonko some actual genuine heartache to kick someone whose music she admires so much. Or it could go a layer deeper than that, and we could be dealing with a pretty hardcore Brook stan. Gonko could be obsessed with Brook to an extraordinarily unhealthy level, and may have requested that he only make music for her as some sort of initiation of romance. I don't know if I'm thinking anywhere near along the right lines here. I could be way off. And maybe this whole situation is actually some sort of new ability from Brook, a brand of soul power that damages his opponents in proportion to the damage they deal to him, like some sort of destiny bond. That, or it has something to do with music itself. With Brook, his music does have tangible powers like playing a lullaby to send people to sleep, or even replicating Bello Betty's power, as on Namakura Island, Brook's music gave all of the cultists the courage and warrior spirit to stand up to the Long Arm tribe. So maybe there's something inbuilt into Brook's music that is affecting Gonko because of how frequently she listens to it. So yeah, not quite sure what's happening, but I am glad that we finally addressed this connection, and it looks like Brook knows who Gonko is as well. Because when he's tied up, he says, "That woman? No, it couldn't be." Couldn't be what, Brook? Who couldn't it be? Just go ahead and tell me who it couldn't be so I know the one person it can't be. And that, combined with what Saul was saying about the Holy Knights being immortal, I suppose implies that Brook knows Gonko from long ago. These two have some sort of history, and I'm really looking forward to diving a bit deeper into Brook's past. Meanwhile, Monkey D. Luffy, he's not in this chapter, but his presence is still very strongly felt, as neither St. Killingham nor St. Summers wish to risk antagonizing him. They both view Luffy in the same vein as starting a fight against Kaido, the biggest of mothers, the blackest of beards, or Shanks, him. And you would think that Gonko would be as well, given her fear of Nika, as well as the fact that she was the one who warned them not to start shit with Luffy a couple of chapters ago to begin with. If they were trying to avoid picking a fight with Luffy, then it must be said that they're doing a pretty terrible job. And they are so incredibly lucky that Luffy has a shiny new Loki friend to play with at the moment. However, it is pretty damn cool to see this level of respect for Luffy. He's only relatively recently gotten to the point where characters don't entirely disregard him as some sort of loud, violent rookie. And of all people, I would have expected the Holy Knights to still kind of hold that arrogant view of him. World nobles have such a clear sense of godlike superiority that it does pleasantly surprise me to hear that they're at least trying to be mildly careful about getting into a conflict with him, but again, they're doing a pretty terrible job of it. Meanwhile, Dory and Broggy also had a pretty hilarious stumble this week for two reasons. One is because in a previous chapter, it was said that their ship is unstoppable, and 3 chapters later, and it is now very much stopped. But what's even better is exactly what stopped it. The giant warrior pirates have been attacked by a group of mothers and wives, which are proving to be by far the scariest and most effective nightmares conjured on Elbaf. And even though these are not the mothers of the giant warrior pirates, I think it's some of their wives, which is pretty funny. But there does seem to be a shared culture of trauma on Elbaf regarding the fear of mothers. So even Dory and Broggy, who are laughing at every other nightmare imaginable, these world-ending creatures, that's not a problem. Funny. But these mothers, oh no, they are deeply affected by this. Which may have enlightened us to the true secret of Elbaf. As it turns out, it was never the giant warrior pirates, nor the army of giants who the world had to fear. No. It was the legion of mothers who raised those pirates and soldiers who have been the true threat all along. Because now the power of 2 mothers have brought down one of the most legendary pirate crews to have ever sailed the Grand Line. And what's funny is that Ripley sees that Sval has crashed and is completely gobsmacked at just how such a thing could have happened. Which nefarious villain could have possibly brought down a vessel full of warriors? And the answer to that question is technically her. She's a mother as well and is probably very familiar with wielding the motherly arts. And also one minor note about Ripley being the one to rush over to help is that Frankie and Lilith are with her. So if we do need to get the ship up and running again, then those are the 2 most perfect people in the entire world to not only do a quick repair, but even a quick upgrade. But a large part of this chapter is spent with St. Summers delivering a dilemma, which he has chosen to do in the most dramatic way possible to milk the dual teats of love and despair. St. Summers isn't just trying to get the Elbaf warriors on the side of the world government, which is his mission, but that's not enough for him. And instead, he's trying to do it in the most world noble way possible by having them abandon their values and assume an identity chosen for them by Summers. The world government need the giants, but they only need them for the fighting. And so all of these libraries and schools, they're an unnecessary complication to that. So Summers is giving the giants a choice: abandon yourselves or abandon your future, your children. And Oda spends 2 pages properly introducing us to the kids one by one, giving us a very short shot of each of their personalities. Some of them are frightened, some of them are optimistic, one is pretty sadly depressed. Some want to fight back, at least one of them is an orphan and is all like, well, at least you have parents. And one of them also appears to be a very selfish Road style character who's saying, just come save me at least, don't care about the others. So it's like within these 10 children, we have a perfect cross-section of Elbaf society. And some people may not care that so much time was spent on the kids, but I think it is very important to highlight them so that we know exactly what it is we're fighting for. And when it comes to this dilemma, exactly what we are being asked to choose between. I now care a lot more about, say, little Ronya because I love her Luffy-like optimism. I also care about Mug because he clearly wants to fight, but he just can't break free. And I also quite like Bent in general because he's the kid who this whole nightmare mother gag is centered around. But what this achieves is that we're not just trying to get invested in the sake of saving hypothetical children. We now know who each and every one of these kids are as an individual. They're no longer just drama props, and the idea of losing any one of them now is a pretty big emotional hit. But at the same time, we also know how heavy of a loss it would be to burn down the Owl Library to save them. And the man at the center of this choice is the absolute perfect character to saddle the dilemma with, being Yarl. Firstly, because one of the kids is his granddaughter, Ylva, so he already has very personal stakes in this. But secondly, because as the oldest living giant, he is the one who remembers and embodies the old Elbaf the most. The island of war that existed long before we built these schools and libraries and tried to do this peace thing. So in Yarl's position, the clear choice would be to save his granddaughter, and this is no doubt part of why Summers made the calculation to give Yarl this choice, to make extra sure that it results in the outcome that he wants, and for the Giants to revert to a culture of exclusively battle lust. This is going to show us how much value Yarl places in this new Elbaf, and there is no way that he is going to sacrifice any child, especially one of his descendanty childs, for schools and libraries, surely. But if Oda was to show us how painful it would be for Yarl to make this decision, then it would show how far Elbaf as a whole has become, for even Yarl to be a man who sees so much value in these new ways. Although ideally, it's not a choice that he's going to have to actually make if the last two characters shown in this chapter have anything to say about it, because the last page of this chapter was everything to me. For the entire time I've been reading One Piece, one of my most consistent complaints is not seeing Robin get enough decent action, and so the end of this chapter is extremely promising in that regard. So there were a lot of people in my comments for last week's videos making excuses for why Robin couldn't possibly fight Saint Summers. One that I heard quite a bit of was how bad of a matchup Robin's abilities were for Summers, since touching thorns traditionally results in big owies. But using that to say that Robin is a bad matchup for Summers is like saying that Luffy was a bad matchup against Don Krieg. I mean, what is a melee fighter like Luffy supposed to do against Don Krieg's cloak of spikes? Nothing. He can't do shit. Luffy's only option is to hide. There is no other solution. So look, I didn't care about all of that last week, and Robin doesn't care about any of it this week. And I think that Summers versus Robin is actually quite an interesting matchup thematically, because you've essentially got a clash of flowers versus thorns, nature versus nature. Robin's devil fruit is the Hana Hana no Mi, the flower fruit, and it is going up against the thorn fruit. So we've got the vivid beauty of life versus the more barren and cruel side of that beauty. And another reason why this could be pretty great is that Robin kicking into action flips the script on Saul. He did everything he could to protect her as a child, but now that Robin has grown and bloomed into this demonic hellflower, it is her turn to protect him. Which also ties into the title of the chapter, the things we find scary, or the things we're afraid of, or however it will be translated. Whatever it turns out to be, Robin is very afraid of losing Saul again, and also extremely afraid of a second Ohara incident happening on Elbaf. With Summers demanding that the Giants burn down the Owl Library, we are now approaching very scary burning of the Tree of Knowledge territory, especially since that Owl Library just so happens to contain all of the books that were saved from the Tree of Knowledge. So this isn't just any old fight for Robin. At the end of the chapter, she has gone and given one of the most serious Nico Robin faces in this series, because this isn't just about Saul, the Giants, the children, or even the Straw Hats. This is a fight to keep Ohara alive. Which, by the way, I'm gonna say it, not the best move by Ange to mention all of that out loud. As part of her plea to Summers to stop all of the bad things it is he's doing, Ange states that all of the secrets discovered by the Ohara scholars are being kept in the Owl Library. And surely if you're Saint Summers, then that just means you are going to make extra sure to burn it down. What's that you say? All of the secrets that could lead to my downfall are in that one very fire vulnerable building? Thank you very much for telling me that unprompted. I swear, even if Ange isn't a traitor, she may as well be one. She's an honorary traitor, and she would be an absolute nightmare to play a hidden role game with. She is the sort of person who will always be on the good side, but still act as suspicious as possible. Still, Ange's words about Ohara do make this very personal for Robin, and I am loving this setup for her, which is why, as excited as I am about Mr. Scopogaban rushing in, I do hope that Robin does get to take a serious stand against Summers, because he is the one directly threatening everything of meaning to her. With that said, Robin could also end up fighting Gonko. She is also there. However, that's only if Brook doesn't end up being freed and sorts out his business with her. Gonko definitely feels more suited to Brook at the moment. They've got stuff to work out. But Robin could be an option while Scopogaban takes on Saint Summers, because he also has a very strong thematic claim to this fight, which I've flagged before. Saint Summers seems to have this large focus on love and twisting it for his entertainment, and Scopogaban is the self-proclaimed missionary of love, now on a mission to save his child who he assumedly loves. And this is exactly what Summers was talking about a couple of chapters ago. In 1143, he said that his most favorite part about this game was the parent-child dynamic. He went on this whole rant about hugging children tight and screaming and wailing, rah rah rah. And that's what we have here with Gaban rushing in to save his child Colin. Although one interesting thing about Gaban is that I can't see him as the typical kind of parent that Summers is thinking about, especially because in this chapter when Colin's name was mentioned as one of the kidnapped children, Gaban was quite proud of his son for thrusting himself straight into the apex of danger. So Gaban doesn't seem like an overly huggy kind of parent. He seems more like a brutally bludgeon family enemies with a big axe kind of parent. And I have to say that as much as I do miss Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, if we're getting some good Robin and Gaban out of it, then I am all in for that. And is there a chance that this all gets wrapped up without the monster trio, and the rest of the Straw Hats go on to prove their worth as the crew of an Emperor of the Sea? I don't know, I think I'm pretty skeptical about that. But at least taking them out of the picture for now is giving the rest of the crew some pivotal screen time that they don't usually see. And as for how long this will last, St. Summers did do an island-wide announcement in this chapter, and while we don't know whether or not this was heard all the way in the underworld, it may very well have been, which would let everyone down there know that they need to stop messing around, and I guess make a pretty big choice as to whether or not to fully free Loki. A choice which this time I imagine Haradin will play a role in making. I think that Luffy's done his damage, and from this point onwards, Loki's freedom may hinge on these two brothers working their crap out, meaning that the much anticipated Loki flashback could be incoming quite soon, especially because the history of Harold seems to be closely tied to the Holy Knights, and so we may need to explore and set that up before we go about satisfactorily defeating them. But you let me know your brain thoughts about the chapter in the comments below.